Hey everybody, my name is Connor Dudley. I'd like to share with you just a brief account of my life before and after coming to know Jesus. I'd like to preface really quick with one important point you need to understand, and that is, I love my family. I have great parents. I was raised in a very loving household. I have two great brothers who I continually maintain solid relationships with. So nothing I'm about to tell you should reflect back on them. No blame to be placed on them. They wouldn't deserve that. They've been nothing but good to me. Now, having said that, I was raised in a household where I, looking back, can probably pinpoint two major influences. And that was, one, we had a strong devotion to the church, no doubt. We were one of the every Sunday families. And two, we were largely influenced and devoted to the world of sports. It's kind of funny, but I think if any outsider looking at my family would agree. I mean, they would say, yes, those are very good highlighted characteristics of this family, church and sports. The difference between me and my two brothers is how well we played those sports. I was at a young age when both my brothers graduated. I hadn't even entered high school when my next brother up graduated. So I got to watch at a young age them develop into the athletes they became. And what I saw were very, very good athletes. They were consistently first team all-conference. They were all-state. They rewrote some of the record books at my hometown high school. And that was something that I looked up, and I went from admiring to idolizing. And in my heart, it became this constant battle to amount to that. And because I never found myself capable of doing so, I became nameless in the Dudley family. And it wasn't because my family made me feel like that. It's because I felt the entire rest of the world looked in at me and said, okay, you know, these two older brothers, they're very good, they're solid athletes, where's the third one fit in? And again, looking back, I don't even know if the world was looking at me like that. Probably doubtful, because that's really mean, and I don't think people are generally that cold-hearted. But that's the way I felt, and it's not just the way I thought, it was literally the way I felt, the way my emotions tackled me. And I became so wrapped up in this idea that I have to amount and I have to be the Dudley that everyone expects me to be, that it drove my level of self-esteem just into an all-time low. When I say an all-time low, it's nothing to be taken half-heartedly. I mean that it would drive me to the point of crying, that I would shut out my other friends because they didn't understand my situation, that they didn't have the shoes to fill that I did. And I didn't ever talk about it was the worst part. I never told anyone because I just thought they wouldn't understand. They would think that I'm just making something out of nothing, and indeed I might have been. But I couldn't escape the way that it made me feel. It made me feel completely unidentifiable. And in every before and after story, I think it's really important to name the how. That right in the middle there, God intervenes somehow. And he says, this no longer is going to be a problem for you. Well, my how was a friend of mine that I'd had for most of my life. His name's Seth Points. I've openly come to him afterward and said, you know, I believe it is the reason that I believe you're the reason that I've come to know Jesus. And if you're watching, Seth, again, I want to thank you for that. I love you, and I can't thank you enough for your obedience to God. My how was Seth Points. And he came to me at a point where I was at rock bottom, and he said, you know, Connor, there's this Jesus that you know about, but you've been missing the entire point. And when I began to see just the way he lived his life and the way he reflected the light of Jesus, I was like, there is something I'm missing. And I said, that's what I want. I started to hear about how Jesus died for our sins, and I began to hear for the first time why. Because I grew up the church, like I said, I knew that, but I found why. And it's so that God can adopt us as his children, so that we no longer have to be apart from him, because by nature we're objects of wrath, but whenever Christ took our sins and then killed them and rose from the dead and defeated it, we are worthy of righteousness so long as we have faith in him. And so went from this all-time low to this all-time high. And I said, God, I want to be identified as your child. That's what I want my identity to be, nothing else. It's not that I have to amount to the expectations of anyone else in the world. I just want to please you. And it's amazing when I look back on that struggle I used to have, that pain that was so real and in my face. When I look back on that now, I say, God, how did I ever let that get to me? That was so minute in the grand scheme of this. Because now that I've found what I should truly be identified in, like the adoption of God, that problem is so insignificant. Yet I cannot deny that it wasn't genuine pain at the time. And because of how painful it used to be, I'm able to see how amazing this grace is now, and how much more grand this life is than the past. So my after is really just being identified as a follower, a believer, and a son of God, and one who's devoted to the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is my identity. And I hope my after is not, it doesn't end here. That from that how on can be an eternal after, that my story can continue to build. And I know as a son of God, identified in that, it'll just be an amazing blessing. That's something I've come to have great faith in. So that's my story. Thank you for listening.